Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. I'd like to focus in this essay on one of the many executive orders signed by President Trump, and the ramifications of this particular executive order I don't think have been fully appreciated. So this is the executive order that relieves any company or business that is bidding for a government contract, a federal government contract, that relieves them from the burden of having to prove that they've got affirmative action and DEI employment processes in place, and that they have a majority of non-white or a majority of minority groups employed. Now, this dates back to initially it sort of kicked off in some of the civil rights sort of type stuff that was going on during the Lyndon Johnson administration in the 1960s, but it's been built on and added to and tightened up and toughened up and broadened and deepened and all that sort of thing since then. And it's gone from being a federal issue to all the states are doing it as well. So another way that it was done was, even if it was a state contract, to build a road or something like that, could be anything, then the federal government would say pay 5% of the total. But then that would fall under federal government employment diversity rules, that you had to have a certain number of minorities in the company. This also this initially was only large companies, but then it came into small. So companies of less than 100, companies of less than 50 people were required to meet these standards. Now, when you've got a smallish company, 50 people isn't huge, and you're required to have a certain number of people on the payroll that can't do their job, then it's a bit of a struggle. You have to hire people, invent important sounding jobs for them and so on. And just so you can go through the charade of saying, well, look, I've hired all these black lesbians, so I'm allowed to bid for government business. Now, the sort of demands that were put on businesses of hiring a certain amount of minorities had no bearing on the business that they were bidding for with the government. So you could be bidding to for NASA, for rocket scientists or something, but they didn't care. Well, okay, so it's rocket scientist type work you're doing, but we want a lot of black wheelchair bound people from the project who are also lesbians, so you have to have that. So there are all sorts of demands, and the demands became more shrill and more ridiculous and so on. The end result of this, though, was to hamper business all around. Now, I got exposed to this, I suppose, in the 1980s when I was working with an American organization in Texas, I think, and they were doing a bid, and they were using some of the technology that my company produced, or the company I worked for produced. So I ended up getting involved in a major bid they were doing, and then it came to this section, which was quite substantial in the bid, saying how many proverbial black lesbians were you employing? And I hadn't seen this sort of thing. That hadn't come to Australia at that point. It probably was in Australia at the through the back door and in the bigger companies being given government contracts. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But this was a smallish company, again, I don't know, 100 people or something, and they had to meet all these requirements of quota and so on. Now, it came through various means. On one side, you had to say, well, in the local area we live in, it could be the city of Dallas or Houston, or I don't know, wherever, Amarillo or something, wherever it was. So there's 25% black people live in this area, 32% Hispanic, or whatever the breakup was, and then a very generous apportionment to gay, lesbian. So this company had to employ effectively 52% racial minorities, and then overall had to be more than half female. So the reality was that they could only employ 20 odd percent straight white males could be employed at the company if they wanted to bid on government contracts. So now this was crazy, and the owner of the business, or the primary owner, and he said, yep, it's crazy, yeah, it's madness, but if we want government business, this is what we have to do. And he had some good contacts in government, so I think there was a bit of cronyism going on in the background there, but at least he could, in order to, this was something he couldn't get past. He had to do this, and there was very much a hard-nosed attitude in the public service that you better do this or else. You could be useless, could be incompetent, you could overprice, the taxpayer could be paying through the nose for this work. That was all fine. You could be making corrupt payments to government officials, and that's okay. But you cannot fail to do this DEI stuff. It was the one thing you just couldn't get by, couldn't get past. And it's the one thing that bribery didn't seem to work on, or so he seemed to think. So this was quite remarkable. There was an ideological sort of absolute cast in concrete view on these things, that you had to do it. So now in return, and this is where the cost to the taxpayer, and I'll again talk about that a bit more in a moment, but the cost to the taxpayer, he said, look, I can deliver this service to the in this case, the state government, Texas. I can deliver this work for $100, round numbers here, $100. But if they want me to do all this other stuff, I'm going to have to ask for $200. And he would explain that quietly in backroom meetings, and they would sign off on that. And that's what stunned me. They were prepared to sign off. So what was the benefit to the community or to the taxpayer or to the work? He had to hire people who were just totally unqualified to do the job, totally unable to do it, and they were worse than useless. So he couldn't give them the work to do and just be patient until they finally got around. He couldn't even do that. They were all hopeless. And these affirmative action hires. Now the odd one maybe would make it, but in general he was hiring utterly useless, incompetent, inept people who were lazy, who couldn't have got the job on any form of merit, and they were effectively being gifted. Not effectively, they were. Let's call it what it is. They were just being gifted jobs that they were totally unqualified for, and all they had to do was turn up, and they would get paid. Now on top of that, if they were very disruptive or didn't bother to turn up, he had a very difficult time getting rid of them. So there was that as well. So it was a headache all around. Now, in repayment for being prepared to take on this social engineering headache, he could go to the government and say, well, you have to pay me twice as much as would normally be the case because I got to do all this social engineering, DEI, affirmative action crap. And this was the thing. The government was quite, yep, okay, no, we'll pay you double, not a problem, as long as you're doing the social engineering. So out of all the things that could be done, out of efficiency, of corruption, and this and that, this was the one thing they wouldn't negotiate on. You must deliver these social engineering outcomes. And I was surprised to see how they were unshakable in this, but were prepared to be flexible in pretty much everything else, such as paying the guy double what the job was really worth in return for hiring all these affirmative action people. So what was being gained here? Well, the taxpayer was paying through the nose and their taxpayer money was being misused and abused and misspent and all that sort of thing, which is not something any government should be committed to conserving taxpayer resources and getting the best value for money and all this sort of stuff. But this certainly definitely wasn't the case. And in return, nor was it furthering the careers or these people. These people, and I met some of them, they didn't give a shit. They were just there. They turn up. They were gifted this job that they never could have got under other circumstances. They were given fancy titles, and they just sat around and did nothing and got paid relative to what they could earn through their own efforts, getting paid quite handsomely. So did they then use that and say, okay, well, you know what? I've got a great opportunity. I'm going to go to night school and do this, or I'm going to really get into this and become expert in the field, or I'm going to. It didn't. They were just zombies, just turning up every day to collect a paycheck and not using it to better themselves or further their careers or enhance their careers or engage in additional learning or anything like that. They didn't give a shit. So it wasn't, nothing was produced or created by that. So it was a loss all around. Nobody won out of this. Nobody. It was a loss and a waste and a terrible perversion and subversion all around. But for some reason, it was perceived as bettering society and helping minorities and so on. Now, just recently, we were looking at bidding on this is in a business I was sharing, we were looking at bidding on a big government contract, and it was beyond our resources, financial resources, to do it. So we went to talk to a bank. I'll generically call them a bank. They weren't like a classic, street front bank or anything. We went to talk to a bank and say, they're well known, and say, look, we're looking at bidding on this business. These are the sort of funds that we think we're going to need. Can we talk about this? How do you think it would work? What do you think of the parameters you want to work with? So it's very much just let's just get together, have a chat, see where we go. There was no high-powered decision to be made one way or another. It was just a preliminary chat, and we had to meet a number of, but we thought we'd just go in and meet the CEO and a couple of his immediate lieutenants, but instead the first meeting we had with quite a junior woman from their HR policy unit, I think it was called, and she's your classic snot-nosed, over-promoted, affirmative action sort of bimbo, and she's fully consumed with all the ideas of the world is a patriarchy and misogyny, and she's fighting back against the colonialism, and she's been instilled. Why they would give her a job is beyond me, but anyway, so she's there. She's come into the room, and she's gonna show us straight white males who's boss and finger wag us, and so anyway, she the only thing, or the first thing she wants to know is, how many minorities do you employ? How many women do you employ in senior roles? And injecting it with the sort of questions you would expect from a CNN snotty reporter. Do you have something against women? Yeah. And it was, the attempt, the multiple attempt at gotchas in the conversation was. Now, I felt like responding, well, have you got something against men? Are you a fanatical man hater? Is that your problem? Is that, but it's not going to achieve anything. I don't think she's not in a position to sort of prevent things moving forward, but she could just make it a little bit harder for us and more difficult and so on. And the mere fact that company and that the CEO sent her to talk to us shows that we're being tested for our politically correct woke sort of credentials, and that was apparent. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent a little idiot like her. Anyway, this goes to show you how far it's permeated into business and finance and banking and BlackRock and all this sort of stuff. Now, if none of these companies, if all these companies are freed from the burden of having to show that they've got the requisite number of black lesbians on their payroll, this, maybe not immediately, but pretty soon, will cause, I think, a massive shift. Now, there'll be some states in the United States, the Democrat-controlled states, that'll fight a rearguard action on this. But now that it's, and I'm sure it'll be challenged through the courts and things like that, but now that it's been official, reversing effectively something in the order of 50 plus years of 60 plus years of affirmative action programs in federal government bidding and federal government contracts, then the effects of this could be huge, because certainly every company I knew in the United States, and this later came to Australia, just to give you an example, there's a company that runs transport systems and buses and that sort of stuff, and they were pretty much all white, and they recently, as in 12 months ago, give or take, they were awarded a large government contract for a particular region of Australia, where they can handle all the transport stuff, like local buses and things like that. And overnight, they went from being 100% white into being 60% non-white, just bang, just like that. And this was obviously a requirement. Well, we'll give you this contract, but this is what you have to do. So the government enforcing social engineering and hiring and supposedly private businesses, but they're not private anymore. The minute they accept that government contract and the taxpayer money, the government, the ideological fanatic, social engineering government, woke and affirmative act, they see that you're now an extension of government, and you now have to do the woke ideological policies that we say, otherwise you don't get this business. Now, clearly they would have given it to someone else. Any business that was going to be compliant in social engineering, affirmative action, hiring and quotas and everything, you had to be compliant, otherwise you just wouldn't get the contract. So the government, Western governments, have cynically and brutally, aggressively used procurement contracts, government contracts, to enforce and instill and spread DEI policies. Now, some companies have gone along with it and say, hey, we don't care, just hand over the money. But the point always comes back to the companies say, okay, well, we'll hire all these black lesbians, but it's going to cost us a lot of money, having all these useless, dead weight, parasitic employees on the payroll. So we're going to have to, ask for more money. Not a problem. Not a problem. We're happy to waste taxpayers' money and piss it up against the wall, provided you do the woke shit that we want you to do. So they've put these, and now this is the same with the, I was went in, I'm going to do another video on this, but I went into the city yesterday. I had some meetings to go to, so I was off fairly early, and around lunchtime, I was standing outside the office of one of the biggest international consulting firms in the world, and so I was outside. So I thought it was a nice sunny day actually, so I thought I'd sit down for a few minutes, just watch the crowds as they came. These guys have got the whole building. Watch the guys as people coming out of the building, and white people were definitely not the majority, and they're fairly young, mostly female. I'd say mostly Indian, and then Chinese, Filipino, that sort of stuff. Then Chinese from places like Singapore. From the looks of it, they sort of walk and act a little bit differently. And given I've travelled so much in the region, I can kind of pick it straight away. But just looking at this and noticing now these jobs are all created. They don't need these people. These people aren't required. These people have no skills they bring. They're just bringing over bulk numbers of Indians and Chinese and third world people, or anyone who's not white, bringing them in and then gifting them jobs. This is affirmative action on triple nuclear levels of affirmative action. So they've married affirmative action, hiring, and mass migration together. So these big consulting firms that hire hundreds, if not thousands of people, they're just creating these bullshit jobs, and then doing this migrant sponsoring thing, which is a scam, and then bringing in vast numbers of brown people, particularly people from India, and then gifting them these supposedly important jobs. So they're swanning around in downtown Sydney. Would any of these people come to Australia without this scam sponsoring? Well, no. Could they have got these jobs without affirmative action and quota hiring? Also, no. So the effect of this, of course, is to dilute the pool of talent and to just reduce standards to floor level. And this is what's going on in every big company around the world that's of course been subject to the globalization mantra. Now, but in addition to that, these businesses have come to the government and say, okay, well, we'll do this if you want, but you're going to have to give us a lot of very juicy contracts. We don't want to have to compete on price or on quality of service anymore. You've got to give us cozy, cushy deals. That's it. And in return, we'll give you all this quota hiring crap, but you got to shovel money into us in return for us doing your social engineering crap. And this is happening all across the Western world at monumental cost to the taxpayer. So there's a few things to unwind here, not only assuming President Trump's executive order functions as it appears to be meant to. These companies are no longer required to hire black lesbians. So that'll knock that straight out, and it'll return to merit-based hiring. And you'll find that all these useless people, the useless jobs they've got, deputy assistant, support director of customer experience, all these, which are given to affirmative action hires, minority groups. Then you take that out of the mix, and then the government can come back to saying, no, we want competitive bids. You deliver a quality service at a competitive price. So it'll restore competition to the marketplace. And that competition is gone. Pretty much, if you agree to do the social, we'll hire 1 million black lesbians, then you've got a free pass from the government. You don't have to compete on quality of service and price anymore, and we'll just give you the business in a sweet little backroom handshake, and we'll you don't have to worry about competing on price. We'll pay you double, we'll pay you triple what it should be, as long as you do our social engineering, meet our social engineering requirements and quotas. So the effect of this will be to create much more competition, much better value for the taxpayer, and it'll free again organisations from that burden of having to employ legions of useless parasite employees simply to make the affirmative action plan look good. And this will be a very, very good thing for the entire Western world. Now, will it mean that lazy, incompetent, can't give a shit, can't be bothered minority group people won't get as many jobs? Well, yes, yes, it'll mean that. But don't think that's a step backwards socially. It's not, because the value to the taxpayer and the fact you've got better quality people in place means ultimately more jobs will be created, thus generating in the end more productive work and more tax revenue from that productive work, which is then better for all of society. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.